Meeting the love of one's life and building a future together is an aspiration shared by many. For Caroline Crouch, that aspiration appeared to take shape at a young age. Born on July 12, 2001, in Athens, Greece, Caroline was the daughter of retired engineer David Crouch and Susan DeLosta. Her early childhood was marked by a relocation at age 8 to the island of Alonos, a coastal community where her parents had chosen to settle due to its scenic environment. It was a place where Caroline spent her formative years, embracing the rhythms of island life and developing interests in swimming and scuba diving. Her teenage years brought new experiences and, eventually, a relationship that would come to define her public story. In 2017, during a Good Friday parade on Alonos, Caroline met Haralambos Sinopoulos, known as Babis, a 27-year-old commercial helicopter pilot. At the time, Caroline was just 15 years old. Their initial meeting, characterized by the pilot's demonstration of wealth and status, including flying a helicopter over her school, quickly developed into a relationship. Within 3 years, the couple had married in Portugal on July 15, 2019, when Caroline had reached the age of 18. The marriage was accompanied by a public perception of romance and aspiration. Babis was described as charismatic and financially secure, while Caroline was a university student and social media user, documenting parts of her life online. Together, they appeared to be a young family with a growing future. They had an infant daughter and had recently purchased land to build a home. For the public, this appeared to be a narrative of a young couple navigating life and parenthood. However, in the early hours of May 11, 2021, the apparent tranquility of their lives was abruptly shattered. At approximately 4:30 a.m., the couple's home, a two-story residence in the suburban area of Glyka on the outskirts of Athens, became the scene of a violent incident. Initial reports indicated that intruders had entered the property and attacked both Babis and Caroline while their 11-month-old daughter was asleep nearby. Emergency services would later describe the scene as severely disturbed, with evidence suggesting a struggle had taken place within the main living areas. At first glance, the incident was interpreted as a robbery. The intruders reportedly asked for cash and valuables, including 10,000 euros stored by the couple for construction purposes and jewelry of significant value. During this time, Babis was reportedly restrained, and Caroline attempted to respond to the intruders' demands. However, as the sequence of events unfolded, it became clear that the incident had escalated beyond robbery. Caroline Crouch was found deceased, while Babis and their infant daughter survived. This initial framing of events, where a young woman appeared to have fallen victim to a violent home invasion, set the stage for a case that would eventually attract national and international attention. Early coverage highlighted the shocking contrast between the family's seemingly ordinary domestic life and the brutal nature of the attack. The combination of a young mother, a small child, and the alleged violence of intruders created widespread concern and speculation regarding motive and responsibility. In this segment, the facts focus on the context: a young family, a marriage that began in adolescence, and the abrupt intrusion of violence into what had been, until that point, an ostensibly secure domestic environment. It is within this framework that the subsequent investigation, inconsistencies, and revelations would later unfold, challenging initial assumptions and ultimately reframing the narrative in a way that would surprise both the public and authorities. In the early morning of May 11, 2021, at approximately 4:30 a.m., emergency services received a call from a residence in Glyka, a suburb on the outskirts of Athens. The call was reported under unusual circumstances. The caller, Babis, was restrained and had duct tape covering his mouth, yet he managed to alert authorities using his mobile phone. The report indicated that the home had been invaded and that both occupants were in immediate danger. Babis had rented the two-story house and was reportedly confronted by 3 individuals wearing hoods. The intruders, armed with firearms, reportedly restrained him and applied duct tape over his mouth and eyes. The assault then extended to Caroline, 19 years old at the time, while their 11-month-old daughter slept nearby. Initial statements suggested the intruders were demanding cash, speaking with Greek and Albanian accents. The couple's infant daughter remained physically unharmed, but was present during the entire incident, exposing the child to significant distress. According to initial reports, the intruders located a stash of cash hidden by the couple. Babis disclosed the location of the money, which was reportedly concealed in an unconventional location, a Monopoly board game box. While the intruders retrieved the cash, they reportedly continued moving throughout the residence, removing jewelry and other valuables. Despite the removal of these items, both Babis and Caroline continued to experience intimidation and physical threat. Upon arrival, first responders noted extensive disruption within the home. Drawers were open and emptied, personal belongings were scattered throughout the rooms, and the Monopoly box, used to conceal the cash, was observed among the disordered items. A security camera in the living room had been removed from the wall, but its memory card was missing, further complicating immediate identification of the intruders. Additionally, the family's pet dog, a husky, was found deceased, strangled with its own leash. Babis, found restrained on the floor of the main bedroom with duct tape covering his eyes and mouth, indicated the severity of the encounter. Caroline was discovered lying face down on the bed. Medical personnel determined that she had died prior to their arrival. Their infant daughter, in proximity to her mother's body, displayed signs of distress but was unharmed physically. Authorities conducted an initial assessment of the scene, noting the sequence of events leading up to the discovery. The intruders reportedly attempted entry through the rear of the property but ultimately gained access via a basement window. After restraining the male occupant, they proceeded to confront Caroline, searching for cash and other valuables, and ultimately causing fatal injury. Forensic evaluation later suggested that the attack lasted several minutes and involved direct physical violence. Despite the chaotic nature of the scene, concrete evidence linking the intruders to the property was minimal. Only a portion of a hood, reportedly left behind during the struggle, was recovered. The absence of fingerprints or DNA at the scene initially made identification of the perpetrators challenging. Sketches created from Babis's account were subsequently used in attempts to identify potential suspects. The events of this morning marked the beginning of a high-profile investigation. What initially appeared to be a straightforward case of home invasion and robbery would soon evolve into a complex examination of inconsistencies, evidence analysis, and ultimately a reassessment of the actual circumstances surrounding Caroline Crouch's death. The combination of physical violence, the presence of an infant, and the initial lack of corroborating evidence created a challenging scenario for law enforcement and laid the groundwork for what would later be described as one of Greece's most perplexing murder cases. Caroline Crouch was born on July 12, 2001, in Athens, Greece, to David Crouch, a retired engineer, and Susan Delasta. Her early childhood was spent in the city, but when she was 8 years old, her family relocated to the island of Alonos. The move was motivated by the couple's appreciation for the island's coastal environment, which offered a lifestyle centered around natural beauty and outdoor activities. Caroline's formative years on the island were shaped by these surroundings, and she developed a strong affinity for swimming and scuba diving, activities that remained part of her life into adolescence. Caroline attended local schools on Alonos, where she was described as a diligent student. It was during her teenage years that she encountered Haralambos Sinopoulos, known as Babis. Their initial meeting occurred during a Good Friday parade in 2017. At that time, Caroline was 15 years old and Babis was 27, working as a commercial helicopter pilot. The relationship developed rapidly, with Babis reportedly using demonstrations of financial and social status, including helicopter flights over her school, to gain her attention. Over the next several years, the relationship evolved into a committed partnership, culminating in the couple's elopement and marriage in Portugal on July 15, 2019. Caroline was 18 at the time of the wedding. Following their marriage, the couple settled in Glyka, a suburban area near Athens. Caroline continued her studies at a university in Athens, while Babis maintained his career as a pilot. Social media activity suggested a domestic life that appeared outwardly happy, with photos and posts depicting family moments and vacations. The couple also had an infant daughter, born within the early years of their marriage. In addition to family life, Caroline and Babis made financial plans for the future. They purchased a plot of land with the intention of building a home for their family. To facilitate the purchase, Caroline had received 50,000 euros from her parents as a gift, while the couple kept approximately 10,000 euros in cash at home for construction purposes. At the time, holding cash at home was not uncommon in Greece, where public concern about banking stability led many households to store savings outside of financial institutions. While public perception emphasized the couple's apparent domestic stability, later evidence would reveal tensions in the marriage. Caroline's personal diary, which would later be reviewed by investigators, indicated instances of conflict between her and Babis. Entries described disagreements, feelings of being controlled, and moments months when Caroline considered leaving the relationship, particularly after the birth of their child. She wrote about staying in the marriage for the sake of their daughter, reflecting a sense of responsibility to maintain family stability despite personal dissatisfaction. Caroline's background also highlighted her close ties to her family and island community. Her upbringing on Alonos fostered strong social connections and an appreciation for coastal life, elements she retained in adulthood. The combination of her youth, personal ambitions, and responsibilities as a mother contributed to a complex personal context at the time of her death. This segment provides an understanding of Caroline Crouch's early life, her relationship history, and the domestic environment in which the tragic events would later occur. By establishing her background, investigators and the public could better contextualize the circumstances surrounding her death, while also providing a factual foundation for the subsequent investigation. Following the discovery of Caroline Crouch's death on May 11, 2021, local authorities in Glyca launched an immediate investigation into the circumstances surrounding the incident. First responders reported significant disruption throughout the residence, including emptied drawers, scattered personal belongings, and a removed security camera in the living room. The couple's dog was also found deceased, and both Babis and the infant daughter were present at the scene. Based on Babis' initial account, investigators concluded that the incident involved 3 intruders who gained access to the property via a basement window. He reported that the intruders were armed, tied him up, and assaulted his wife while demanding cash and valuables. This initial description framed the incident as a violent home invasion and robbery. Authorities noted that approximately 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry, valued at roughly 20,000 euros, had been removed from the residence. The first phase of the investigation involved securing the scene and cataloging all physical evidence. While the residence appeared ransacked, concrete forensic evidence linking the intruders to the home was minimal. No fingerprints or DNA were recovered, and the memory card for the security camera had been removed. Investigators did recover a portion of a hood, reportedly left behind during the struggle, which provided a limited lead for identification. A preliminary sketch of the suspected intruder was created based on Babis's account, describing a tall, dark-skinned individual of larger build. Police also reviewed local security footage from nearby homes and businesses. A dark-colored vehicle and a motorcycle were observed in the vicinity of the Crouch residence during the early morning hours, suggesting surveillance or scouting of the property. These recordings, while not conclusive, provided additional context regarding the timing and potential movement of the intruders. Early speculation regarding motive focused on the reported cash and valuables in the household. Investigators examined the couple's financial situation, confirming that cash had been kept in the residence to fund construction of a planned home. Interviews with family members and acquaintances aimed to establish whether anyone outside the immediate family was aware of these funds, considering that knowledge of the cash could have influenced the incident. Attention was also directed toward criminal activity patterns in the surrounding area. Police reviewed recent break-ins and thefts in Glyca and adjacent neighborhoods. Several incidents bore similarities to Babis's account, including forced entry through basement windows and targeted removal of cash and valuables. This line of inquiry prompted initial suspicions toward individuals associated with local organized crime groups, particularly those known for repeat offenses involving home invasions. While initial leads focused on external perpetrators, investigators also conducted extensive interviews with family, friends, and neighbors to corroborate the timeline and sequence of events provided by Babis. At this stage, the case was treated as a complex, professional home invasion, with the primary goal of identifying the individuals responsible for the violence and recovering stolen property. The combination of a restrained male, a deceased female, a present infant, and minimal forensic evidence made the investigation challenging. Authorities were faced with a high-profile case that attracted public attention and media coverage, amplifying pressure to resolve the crime quickly. Despite the initial assumption of robbery as the primary motive, questions regarding the necessity of fatal violence and the exact circumstances of Caroline Crouch's death would become central to subsequent investigative efforts. As the investigation into Caroline Crouch's death continued, law enforcement began analyzing the events of May 11th in greater detail. Early leads initially focused on a violent home invasion. However, subsequent findings revealed inconsistencies in Babis' account of the night. Investigators noted discrepancies between his statements, physical evidence, and data collected from technology within the residence. One significant point of analysis concerned the reported entry point. Babis indicated that the intruders had gained access through a basement window. However, the window was small, and authorities determined that the described intruder, based on Babis's sketch, would have been physically unlikely to enter through that opening. Neighbors also reported minimal noise during the early morning hours. While Babis described the intruders ransacking the house, no sounds of furniture being moved or drawers opened were observed, and the infant did not display evidence of prolonged distress during the supposed time frame of the attack. Investigators also examined digital evidence. Caroline wore a smartwatch that monitored her pulse. Data from the device indicated that at 3:58 a.m., her pulse was at a resting level, suggesting she was asleep. By 4:05 a.m., readings showed a 50% increase, consistent with physical or emotional stress, and by 4:11 a.m., her heart rate suggested she had stopped, occurring prior to the time Babis claimed the attack had taken place. Similarly, Babis's own smartphone, which tracked his movement, indicated activity inconsistent with being tied up or incapacitated as he had reported. Further discrepancies arose from the security camera in the living room. Babis claimed that the intruders had removed the memory card during the attack. However, analysis revealed that the card had been removed at 1:20 a.m., several hours before the reported incident. This finding, combined with the absence of forensic evidence linking external individuals to the scene, prompted investigators to reconsider the initial assumption of external perpetrators. Police also reviewed phone records and text messages exchanged between Caroline and Babis in the hours leading up to her death. These records reflected arguments and disagreements between the couple, suggesting tension in the relationship. Additionally, investigators obtained Caroline's personal diary, which contained entries referencing conflicts, her desire to leave the relationship, and concerns about Babis's controlling behavior. These insights added context to the timeline and indicated potential internal factors contributing to the incident. As a result of these findings, authorities expanded the scope of the investigation to include the possibility of the death being committed by someone within the household. Forensic teams continued to examine the residence, noting the absence of DNA or fingerprints from external parties. Interviews with neighbors and witnesses supported the conclusion that no third party had entered or exited the property in the early morning hours as described. This phase of the investigation represented a critical turning point. By combining digital evidence, forensic analysis, and witness statements, authorities began to construct an alternative sequence of events that challenged the narrative initially provided by Babis. While the public perception had initially framed the case as a home invasion, emerging evidence suggested a more complex scenario, with the possibility that the circumstances of Caroline Crouch's death may have been misrepresented. The investigation continued with heightened scrutiny on the couple's domestic environment, leading to targeted interrogations, detailed analysis of personal devices, and renewed attention to inconsistencies. These efforts would ultimately lead to the identification of the primary suspect and a clearer understanding of the events that unfolded on May 11th, setting the stage for the resolution of one of Greece's most closely examined cases. Following the identification of inconsistencies in the initial account, investigators began focusing on Haralambos Sinopoulos, known as Babis, as a potential suspect in Caroline Crouch's death. Police conducted a series of targeted interrogations, during which Babis was presented with the contradictions between his statements, digital evidence, and observations from the crime scene. The evidence suggested that the circumstances of May 11th were not consistent with a third-party home invasion. Babis was interrogated extensively over a period of several days. Investigators reviewed the smartwatch data from Caroline, which indicated her heart had stopped at 4:11 a.m. prior to the timeline he had provided. His smartphone also demonstrated movement inconsistent with being restrained. Additional inconsistencies included the removal of the security camera memory card hours before the reported intrusion and witness statements confirming minimal noise during the early morning hours. Collectively, these findings challenged his version of events. After multiple hours of questioning, Babis eventually provided a confession. In his statement, he acknowledged that the altercation with Caroline began on the evening of May 10, 2021. According to his account, arguments regarding their daughter and the relationship escalated into physical conflict. Babis stated that Caroline had thrown their infant child into the cot and physically confronted him, which he described as a triggering factor for his actions. Babis admitted that he had intentionally killed Caroline using manual strangulation and by applying a pillow to her face. He described using his body weight to ensure fatality, resulting in the death of Caroline Crouch in the presence of their 11-month-old daughter. Following the act, he staged the scene to resemble a robbery and home invasion. This included restraining himself with rope and duct tape, placing the infant near Caroline's body, and killing the family dog, actions intended to create the appearance of external perpetrators. He reportedly expressed awareness of the gravity of his actions and acknowledged the moral and legal responsibility for the crime. Investigators confirmed that the physical evidence and digital records were consistent with his confession, establishing a timeline and sequence of events that contradicted the initial narrative of intruders conducting a violent robbery. The confession also clarified why no external DNA or fingerprints had been found at the scene and why security footage and witness accounts were inconsistent with the reported intrusion. Following the confession, Babis was formally charged with premeditated murder, preventing the course of justice, lying to authorities, and animal abuse. Court proceedings documented the details of the crime, the staging of the scene, and the inconsistencies that initially misled investigators and the public. Expert testimony described the sequence of events and the deliberate nature of the actions, highlighting both the premeditation and the attempt to misdirect law enforcement. The case drew significant public attention, both nationally and internationally, due to the apparent contrast between the couple's previously perceived domestic life and the deliberate nature of the crime. Legal outcomes reflected the seriousness of the charges, and Babis was found guilty on all counts. The judicial process concluded with the imposition of a sentence consistent with Greek legal standards for premeditated homicide and related offenses. The resolution of the case not only brought clarity to the circumstances of Caroline Crouch's death, but also underscored the investigative importance of corroborating digital, forensic, and testimonial evidence. By carefully analyzing inconsistencies and verifying technological and physical records, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of events accurately, ensuring that the legal outcome corresponded with the factual record. Following the resolution of the investigation and the conviction of Haralambos Sinopoulos, the aftermath of Caroline Crouch's death had a significant impact on her family, the local community, and the broader public. Caroline was laid to rest 3 days after her death, with her burial taking place on the island of Alonos, the location where she had spent her childhood and where her parents had chosen to reside. The funeral was attended by family and close acquaintances who gathered to honor her memory and mourn the loss of a young life. Babis Sinopoulos' confession and the details of the case brought to light the contrast between the family's perceived domestic stability and the underlying tensions that had developed within the household. In statements following the funeral, Babis described Caroline as a significant presence in his life and emphasized the impact of her loss on their infant daughter. He noted that the child would grow up without knowing her mother directly, highlighting the personal and emotional consequences of the events for the immediate family. Public and media attention on the case was extensive. Reports emphasized both the premeditated nature of the murder and the initial misdirection involving the staged home invasion. Coverage also focused on the investigative methods that led to the identification of the perpetrator, including the analysis of digital evidence, forensic records, and discrepancies in the initial account provided by Babis. The case became widely cited as an example of the importance of technological and forensic tools in modern homicide investigations. Authorities and legal experts highlighted the implications of the case for law enforcement practices. The investigation illustrated the challenges posed when physical evidence is minimal and when initial accounts may be intentionally misleading. Digital evidence, including wearable technology and smartphone data, proved crucial in reconstructing timelines and verifying statements. The successful resolution of the case demonstrated the necessity of integrating multiple sources of evidence to ensure accurate outcomes in complex investigations. For Caroline's family, the personal impact of the case was profound. Her parents, David Crouch and Susan DeLosta, expressed gratitude toward law enforcement for the thorough pursuit of justice. They emphasized the importance of continued public awareness about domestic violence and the need for vigilance in protecting vulnerable family members. The case also prompted discussions within the community regarding early warning signs of domestic tension and the potential for escalation into violence. In a broader societal context, the case reinforced discussions on domestic safety, particularly in households with infants or young children. Analysts noted that while the initial framing suggested an external threat, the eventual findings underscored the potential for internal household conflicts to escalate into lethal outcomes. Public commentary highlighted the emotional and psychological impact of such cases, emphasizing both the human cost and the lessons for preventative measures. The murder of Caroline Crouch and the subsequent conviction of Babisanopoulos remain a focal point in discussions of modern investigative methods, domestic safety, and the challenges of distinguishing perception from reality in complex criminal cases. The incident continues to serve as a case study for investigators, legal professionals, and the public, illustrating the interplay between evidence, narrative, and the pursuit of justice in homicide investigations.